Listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back today from Make a Shiny Shout Out to show number 476, 670, and 424 shows to 500. That's half a thousand. That's not really a number, but that's what it is. This is Listener Funded Radio. What does that mean? It means that your donations or subscriptions or purchases of gear, etc., help keep this station on the air. That's correct. If you like it, then donate if you can. Better yet, if you subscribe, become part of the community. And better yet, once you do that, also come into the chat. The chat is always lively. We got a few regulars always. And hey there, I just want to call out to everybody in the chat room and to our new and old listeners. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's one of those phrases that will lose all meaning in a few years. You know, I'm going to dial the phone. I'm going to tune into the radio. No one does this anymore. Just push a button. What does it mean when you tune? So I'm in the fortunate position of having an old vacuum tube radio. My grandfather, I should say, left me. It's German. And it doesn't go up all the way in the band like the new ones do, but it does have a vacuum tube in it. And you can actually see the tuning as you tune it, because there's a little light, not like an LED, it's actually the vacuum tube light. And the more solid it gets, the stronger the signal it is. And the radio is probably the best radio. The radio would be, how old now? It'd be close to 80, 90 years old, that radio. It's a wooden, beautiful walnut wood. It's a Saba radio, S-A-B-A, Saba. And yeah, it's phenomenal. My grandfather, I know he always had it playing. It's all European stations on in front of it, completely useless here in Australia, as far as stations go. Of course, you can listen to it, but the stations are different. But yeah, so we are living through history. In the olden times, history was moving slowly. Things would change slowly. Now, if you're my age, in between 40 and 50. You would have seen technologies come and go, phrases come and go, entire political systems come and go, countries break up, countries reform in extremely short spans of time. Normally, to see that kind of change, you need massive wars. World War I, World War II, the 30 Years' War, etc. So, I mean, think about it. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. Dave.
That's crazy.
30 years.
Crazy
and that was just a European war. Why did it take so long? Well, it took forever to get anywhere. That was one reason. But it was just tough doing business in those days from a war perspective. Anyway,
unless you were selling war things.
But yeah, that's right. I don't know if we can. I mean, I'm just looking at the chat here.
Yeah.
I know we used to have a dial-in number, but there are a lot of changes in the servers and such. So I really don't know if we can bring people in or not. I have no idea.
I had a caller tried to call me and join us. However, I was warned by Skype that I can't add an anonymous person. So if I do, it'll cut my link to the server and then only be talking to them. Unfortunately, if you're not already a friend of mine on Skype, I can't just bring you in. Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So sorry. So maybe next time
we can work on it.
Okay. So we are though talking about biological warfare. Really, is what we're talking about.
And this is part 6.
Geez, time flies.
And it's show number for the people that are just picking up this stream. This is show number 476.
Correct. So what have we learned thus far? Well, we have learned that a large number, scores of microbiologists were killed under strange circumstances in the years from 2000 until now. Okay, a lot of them, and a lot of them leading lights. I mean, if they're just regular folk, who cares? But these were leading lights in their respective research areas, right? We've also learned what COVID or SARS-CoV-2 really is like. We've looked at long COVID. We've looked at the potential impact on male fertility. We have looked at, clearly the numbers, which are phenomenally bad, and the spread. So what we're going to talk about now is some more history, some more data points that lead up to the pandemic which started really in 2019, and then of course took off in 2020. And I think, Dave, you said we're now talking about the research top AIDS, right? So this article is from 2014.
Correct.
Top AIDS researchers killed in Malaysia airline crash. You might remember this, July 18, 2014. It was shot down. So about 100 people traveling to a global AIDS conference in Australia were on board the Malaysia Airlines flight that crashed and killed 298 people in eastern Ukraine, reports the Sydney Morning Herald. The researchers, health workers and activists were on their way to the International AIDS Conference in Melbourne. Among the victims planning to attend was Dutch national Joop Lange, a top AIDS researcher and former International AIDS Society president. Britain Glenn Thomas, a spokesperson for the World Health Organization and a former BBC journalist, was also on flight MH17. So there were not hundreds of AIDS research scientists killed, but scores of AIDS research scientists and leading lights yet again. Okay, what about other data points though, Dave?
Yeah, this is the next day story. MH17 crash, total shock at AIDS researcher deaths. And at least 6 passengers who died on board the crashed Malaysia Airlines plane were travelling to a major international AIDS conference. They include Professor Joop Lange, a prominent and popular researcher and former president of the... Did you read this already, Becky? International AIDS Society?
Yes.
Ah, right. So we had 2 stories, the same? Maybe?
No, not quite the same. Keep going.
Yeah, right, okay. Delegates who have already arrived at the conference in Australia said they were in total shock. Early reports suggested that at least 100 delegates had been killed, but that figure has now been revised to 6.
There you go.
They were named by the IAS as Pim de Kuja, Lissy van Mens, Maria Adriana de Schutter, Glenn Thomas, Joop Lange, and his partner Jacqueline van Tongeren.
That's correct. And I'm just opening up a new. Sorry.
A new.
Well, keep going.
Are you going through some life changes, Mickey?
No, my word crashed. That's super, isn't
You're
it?
opening up a new. Oh.
I'm not even like.
Okay, so in 2014, this is the data points. Town sealed off after man dies of plague in China. Yes, and to everybody, before I start reading, the plague is still about.
Mm-hmm.
So both the bubonic and the pneumonic plague are still about in society, just very rare to see it pop up and down. So a Chinese town has been sealed off. This is in 2014. And 151 people placed in quarantine since last week after a man died of bubonic plague, state media said Tuesday in 2014. The 30,000 people living in Yumen in the northwestern province of Gansu are not being allowed to leave, and police at roadblocks on its perimeter are telling motorists to find alternative routes. The television arm of the official news agency Xinhua said other reports said that earlier this month the 38-year-old victim had found a dead marmot, a small furry animal which lives on grasslands and is related to the squirrel. Plague is categorized as a Class A infectious disease in China, and a text report by Xinhua said the most serious under China's law on the prevention and treatment of infectious diseases. You got a law on it? Wow. Bubonic plague is a bacterial infection best known for the Black Death, a virulent epidemic of the disease that killed tens of millions, just remember those numbers, of people in the 14th century in Europe. A most recent pandemic, the modern plague, began in China in the 1860s and reached Hong Kong by 1894. The US Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, says on its website, the pandemic caused approximately 10 million deaths. Did anyone ever hear about these deaths, Mackie?
No, sir.
10 million in China? No. Modern antibiotics are effective in treating plague, the CDC says, but without prompt treatment, it can cause serious illness or death. Human plague infections continue to occur in the western United States, but significantly more cases occur in parts of Africa and Asia, it adds. Cases occasionally emerge in China. A villager was found who found a dead marmot and ate it with other residents of Litang in Sichuan province in the southwest died of disease on September 2012. And now a newspaper run by the Health of Ministry reported that story.
Yeah, so again, these are, in my opinion, some of them accidents, some are test cases. This may have been a test case to see how quickly China can shut down. All right, in my opinion. It killed many people, sure enough, but ultimately, unless you do a crisis test, you don't know how good your precautions are.
I've got a comment, Mickey. So when I read out the 30,000 people living in Yumen in the northwestern province of Jiangsu are not allowed to leave, exactly. I remember before we got the coronavirus spreading everywhere, SARS-CoV-2.
Yep.
That number seemed extraordinary.
I know.
But today, that's nothing. Good luck with that. Don't care. 30,000 rookie numbers.
That's not even a daily rate anymore, right?
Them's rookie numbers, Mackie.
It's not even an hourly number anymore. Really. Now, the interesting thing, I want your attention on this, guys. We're talking about 2014. These are all 2014 stories. MH17, the plague in China, also now Ebola outbreak in Guinea, unprecedented. Ebola is spread by close contact and kills between 25 and 90% of victims. Now imagine SARS-CoV-2 was like this. We would now be on a ghost planet. The Ebola outbreak that has killed 78 people in Guinea is unprecedented, the medical charity has said. An official with Médecins Sans Frontières, which is the Doctors Without Borders, said the spread of the disease across the country made it very difficult to control. The West African state is facing a battle to contain the outbreak after cases were reported in areas that are hundreds of kilometers apart. Okay, now Ebola is spread by close contact and kills, like I said earlier, between 25 and 90% of its victims. The outbreak of Ebola had centered on Guinea's remote southeast region of 𝐶𝐸, but it took the authorities 6 weeks to identify the disease. The first 2 Liberians confirmed as dying from Ebola were sisters, one of whom had recently returned from Guinea. Sierra Leone has also reported 5 suspected cases, none of which have been confirmed yet, while Senegal, another neighbor of Guinea's, has closed its land border. Outbreaks of Ebola occur primarily in remote villages in Central and West Africa and near tropical rainforests, so says the World Health Organization. Now, bear in mind, this was 2014 as well. I think 2013 was a critical year on a number of fronts. I know this is conspiratorial craziness. I get it. But this is the shiny side out, so I can. We are testing a lot of things then. I think we were testing spread vectors in China. I think we were testing spread vectors in Africa. And I think we got rid of a whole bunch of scientists in 2014 as well. I think 2014 was one of those nexus years, a critical year for this plan to unfold, okay? Because the next story is also from 2014, Dave.
Yeah, it sure is. This is TB, or tuberculosis, in Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea teetering on the brink of a runaway tuberculosis epidemic, health workers say. And we now know that, we have MRS version now, right? Is it MDS, MRS? Anyway. Multi-drug resistant, MDR.
Yep.
I knew there was an acronym there somewhere. And this was updated Wednesday, 26th March 2014. Papua New Guinea is said to be teetering on the brink of tuberculosis epidemic. There are 15,000 new cases of tuberculosis recorded annually, once again rookie numbers, in PNG, and the World Health Organization says nearly a quarter of these cases prove fatal. UNAIDS, PNG, that's United Nations AIDS, Papua New Guinea. Coordinator Stuart Watson says there should be automatic testing for both HIV and TB patients. There's certainly something of a disconnect in most countries, particularly in Papua New Guinea, between TB and the HIV programs, Mr. Watson told the Pacific Beat. One of the issues for us is to try and build more synergy, more connection, and eventually to have really totally integrated programs, but we're a long way from that. He said people living with HIV and PNG are most at risk of contracting tuberculosis. Now, tuberculosis is a disease of poverty, of overcrowding, of many of the social issues that Papua New Guinea faces, Mr. Watson said worryingly. Cases of drug-resistant and extra drug-resistant TB are increasing in PNG. The cost of dealing with drug-resistant and extra drug-resistant cases is absolutely extraordinary. We need to get control of this before we really have a completely runaway TB epidemic with greater drug resistance. TB is treatable. TB is something that is preventable, unlike HIV. So this is really quite a tragedy.
Again, 2014. Okay, let's be clear on that. And interesting enough, Papua New Guinea is now also in the grip of a really bad SARS-CoV-2 wave, I guess, or peak outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for Australia, that's a worry because they're literally just a stone's throw away from us. You could use a boat and paddle across to Australia from Papua New Guinea. You really can. And it's a real problem. Now, a TB, when this whole COVID-19 thing first started, I was more worried about tuberculosis, especially the multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis that was happening literally at our doorstep, literally. Not very far at all. Now, you don't die immediately, but if you get it, you will die. Okay, you will die eventually from it. And then relatively quickly, but not as quickly, of course, as Ebola or anything like that. But that was, for me, that was the real problem. Now, interestingly enough, there was an update. And I want to quickly go back to the title of the 2014 article. This is the title: Papua New Guinea teetering on the brink of a runaway tuberculosis epidemic, health workers say. That was the title.
Mm-hmm.
Papua New Guinea teetering on the brink of a runaway tuberculosis epidemic. This is the update. Well, this is the update, I guess, or the article I could find that would update us on the situation. 2019 update. Okay. TB.
That's 5 years later.
Yeah, TB in Papua New Guinea, and the title is a raging TB epidemic in Papua New Guinea threatens to destabilize the entire Asia Pacific. So we're going from Papua New Guinea teetering on the brink of a runaway tuberculosis epidemic to a raging TB epidemic in Papua New Guinea threatens to destabilize the entire Asia Pacific. Now, a note here from myself. There haven't been any news items since that I could find, since the SARS-CoV-2 grabbed the headlines and imagination. All right, so in 5 years, we've gone from teetering on the brink to raging TB epidemic.
It sounds worse to me, Mackie.
A little bit worse. So this was by Lucy Sheriff, a different person. The first article was by Geraldine Coates. This is by that was written for ABC Australia, and this article here was written for the Global Post by Lucy Sheriff, and you can of course find the article yourself. It's a long article. I want to just share the salient points. In a stark white hospital room in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, a man named Keith spends long days quarantined in an entire wing. Keith, in his 50s, wears a grubby t-shirt and pants and sports a long, scraggly beard, is highly contagious with a rare strain of extremely drug-resistant tuberculosis. I'm happy I'm here, Keith says. I've run away from the hospital many times, but now I know that this is a good thing, that I'm here. I need to take my medication so I can get better. Homeless for many years, Keith doesn't know his last name. His tattered sneakers sit neatly by the door. A poster on the wall above the sink shows a shaven Keith holding hands with Dr. Randy Mocha, a TB specialist at Port Moresby General Hospital. And the poster reads, "Promise I will take my full treatment this time, so Lord, please help me to do so." Now, that's of course a problem that Keith is making, right? Mm-hmm. On the opposite wall, there's a simple wooden cross. Talk about irony. The only decoration in Keith's room, bar a small wooden crucifix, is the poster, right? And this is it's a very I guess desolate place. Now we have to keep him isolated. We don't have a choice, and that's not a great solution when you desperately need hospital beds. I'm worried that there will be more like him out there, who we don't even know about. We have to, that's what Dr. Mocha said. So Dr. Mocha, Randy Mocha, is the specialist. Okay. We're very keen to reduce our default rates, patients who don't finish treatment, and increase our capacity to treat others and perform more outreach work. In Papua New Guinea, a TB epidemic threatens to turn into a disaster that could destabilize the Asia-Pacific region. Situated about 90 miles from Australia in the Pacific Ocean, the island nation sees more than 100 cases of TB every day. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but if you consider the small population size of Papua New Guinea, it is quite a lot. And like they're saying here, it's about 160, 170 kilometers off the coast of northern Australia. But the key thing here is this, okay? It is a disease that has gone completely radio silent since COVID.
Yeah.
And this disease is not stopping. Now, because it is so highly contagious, tuberculosis, this kind of tuberculosis, they have to keep people completely isolated. What do you do when you run out of hospital beds that you need to give your SARS-CoV-2 patients, right? What do? You turn these people out because these people will die anyway, right? Chances are that you can't help them. So do you turn them out? I have no idea what happened in Papua New Guinea. I don't know what happened with the rest of them either. In Papua New Guinea, as I said, so of these 100 cases, 5 are drug resistant, so that's 5%. And 10 people will die according to World Health Organization figures. Yet, in a nation where more than 1/3 of the population is illiterate, that's 30%, these figures grossly underestimate the actual number of TB cases due to underreporting. Additionally, 86% of the country's 8 million citizens live in rural areas with little or no access to healthcare, further obscuring the numbers. Now, this is the same situation, Dave, we're facing globally, especially in places like Africa, South America, with SARS-CoV-2. Even in India, massive amounts of people, huge chunks of the population that have zero access to healthcare. Full stop. Look, the country offers a grim textbook case of how education infrastructure impact healthcare. The government has neither the finances nor the resources to tackle TB as an increasingly insurmountable health crisis. That's exactly where we are with India today. Okay? This is World War III. We are working incredibly hard to fight this, but we need new drugs that we don't have. We need resources that we don't have. And whatever we don't do now will come back to haunt us in the future. Right? This is what Payson Dakulala said, Deputy Secretary of the National Health Services of Papua New Guinea. Right? A report published in May by the Economist Intelligence Unit warned of the consequences of failing to act against drug-resistant TB, calling the current response a global failure. In the same month, the United Nations issued an urgent warning about the growing peril of drug-resistant infections, not just TB, but all of them. The report stated at least 700,000 people die worldwide each year due to drug-resistant diseases. 230,000 of those, or maybe about roughly 35% of those die from multi-drug-resistant TB. According to the World Health Organization, 10 million new TB cases appeared globally in 2017 alone. That's a higher rate of infection than SARS-CoV-2. Okay? That same year, it killed 1.6 million people, making TB the world's deadliest infectious disease. Okay? This grim trend is exportable to neighboring countries. Of course it is. Okay? Look, multi-drug resistant TB clearly poses a significant risk. The official, this is an Australian health official, said. The cost of addressing the strain is 200 times the cost of treating TB, so it makes sense for us to invest in treatments. There's a clear human need to address this epidemic. There's just 3.1 miles separating Australia and Papua New Guinea, referring to 𝐵𝐸𝐸 Island, which is part of Queensland. And so the regional health security issue is imperative. The 90 miles are referring to continental Australia, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The Australian government expressed commitment to addressing health security challenges in the Indo-Pacific region by preparing for infectious disease outbreaks, according to a spokesperson for the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, speaking to the world. This was 2019, everybody.
Yeah, they did everything about it too, I bet.
Yeah, before SARS-CoV-2, right? Now, what Papua New Guinea says is this, or the officials of Papua New Guinea, right? They're saying, we need help. We cannot fight this alone. That was true then, and it is true now. Okay? It is really interesting to see how that whole issue is no longer reported upon. I couldn't find a single article, Dave, that was written after 2019 on this. Nothing.
Wow.
And I know for a fact that Papua New Guinea is in the grip of SARS-CoV-2 as well. They had a massive spike recently, like maybe a second wave, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly a big problem, right? And globally, of course. See, and this is another reason for this article here is to highlight that, yes, of course, we have to worry about COVID, naturally. But TB hasn't gone away. Ebola hasn't gone away. The plague hasn't gone away. Heart disease hasn't gone away. Accidents haven't gone away. Okay?
Those stories are just pushed down and we don't hear them.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And in fact, with multi-drug resistant diseases, chances are they're getting worse and worse, considering that all health systems globally are completely overstretched. It's just a fact of it's just what it is. But my point is that everything else, while there's so much focus on COVID-19, let's call it that, everything else sort of shrinks away. It still is there, though. People still die from other diseases and for other reasons. What SARS-CoV-2 does, it takes away resources that would be needed to fight all the other things, right? And takes focus off all the other diseases. I mean, if there was an Ebola outbreak now in Africa, which just, whatever. Yeah, okay. Whatever. Mm-hmm. Right? If there was another massive spike in TB that is now going into, I don't know, Vanuatu, into Fiji, the other Pacific Islands, whatever, even Southeast Asia. Look, well, we're dealing with COVID-19 here, right? So what do you mean do? This is
because we're mono-focused, Mickey. We can't do everything at once.
Completely. No, but maybe we should tell people what MDR-TB is. I mean, we talked about it a bit, but it might help.
I'm hoping it will. Multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, MDR-TB, is defined as tuberculosis that is resistant to at least isoniazid, or INH, and rifampicin, or RMP, the two most powerful first-line treatment anti-TB drugs. TB. Isolates that are multiply resistant to any other combination of anti-TB drugs, but not to INH and RMP, are not classed as MDR-TB. This multi-drug resistant TB develops in otherwise treatable TB when the course of antibiotics is interrupted and the levels of drug in the body are insufficient to kill 100% of bacteria. This can happen for a number of reasons. Patients may feel better and halt their antibiotic course. Drug supplies may run out or become scarce. Patients may forget to take their medication from time to time, or patients do not receive effective therapy. Most tuberculosis therapy consists of short-course chemotherapy, which is only curing a small percentage of patients with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. So it's saying it's not very successful, but at least it's helping in some cases. Delays in second-line drugs make multi-drug resistant tuberculosis more difficult to treat. MDR TB is spread from person to person as readily as drug-sensitive TB. And in the same manner, this is the same thing with why masks are good for those people who are infected, tough for the other people. It's all about the microspherules of saliva that you cough out. That's how it's suspended in air. Now, Mickey, I would hope that the amount of caution and preparedness that we've had for the SARS-CoV-2 virus and our cleanliness and while it's inhalable, both of them are inhalable, if only we prevented the inhalation of moisture that's come from somebody else, then we could at least limit it to limit the spread and stop it from getting to others. But it doesn't sound like we're going to do that at all. Our shopping centres right now, we're so blasé, no one even cares.
Yeah, you know what? I went out, when was it, yesterday? Yesterday, Saturday, right? I had to do some shopping, and I was the only person, and I do it because my mom is undergoing some special treatments. So I wear a mask, right? And I was the only one, though. I went to 4 or 5 different places, and again, I was the only one wearing a mask. I am paranoid in that sense because I can't afford to get sick and pass it on. I mean, I myself, when I get sick, I don't get sick, who cares? But I cannot afford to pass it on to anyone,
Yeah. I completely understand. What's the epidemiology?
Cases of MDR tuberculosis have been reported in every country surveyed. MDR TB most commonly develops in the course of TB treatment and is most commonly due to doctors giving inappropriate treatment or patients missing doses, as Dave outlined, or failing to complete their treatment. Because MDR tuberculosis is an airborne pathogen, patients with active pulmonary tuberculosis caused by a multi-drug resistant strain can transmit the disease if they are alive and coughing. Alive and coughing. Dead and coughing, that would be a whole different problem. TB strains are often less fit and less transmissible, and outbreaks occur more readily in people with weakened immune systems, for example, patients with HIV. And this is really, where we have a link to the death of the AIDS as well as the TB researchers, right? Again, see, all diseases out there in the world affect people with weakened immune system more than others. That's what they're talking about, underlying health conditions, right? And that's why we've seen, in my opinion, so many people die in other areas of infectious disease research and underlying conditions like AIDS. Look, see, you don't die from HIV. Okay, no one ever dies from it.
No, that's only a virus. You would die from the disease, which is acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
Yeah, but even that doesn't kill you.
Well, it kills you. It prevents you from being able to stop other things from killing you.
Bingo. It is a genius disease. If I were to engineer a virus, we've talked about this before, I would engineer the HIV virus. That's what I would do, right? Human immune deficiency virus. Because Dave is right.
Acquired immune deficiency.
Yeah, exactly. The virus doesn't kill you. What it does, it damages your immune system to such a point that you no longer can protect yourself against other diseases.
Almost
and that's really
at all. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, if you have it, then SARS-CoV-2 is probably a much worse outcome for you. Now, the World Health Organization estimates that there were about 500,000 new MDR TB cases in the world in 2011, and about 60% of these cases occurred in Brazil, China, India, the Russian Federation, and South Africa alone. And in Moldova, the crumbling health system has also led to a rise of MDR TB. Clearly, this article was written prior to the PNG outbreaks and concern for the Asia-Pacific region here as well. Now, you know what I found though, Dave? People say, it's that same kind of mindset that people have around, the government would never do this. And it would never do it. Like, a 9/11, or when you talk about 9/11, you say, well, maybe the government knew. That's impossible, Mackie. The government would never do that. They wouldn't kill 3,500 of their own people.
Rubbish.
Then you talk about Operation Northwoods, okay?
Yes.
And you talk about MK Ultra. You talk about the Tuskegee men.
What about when they sprayed chemicals from the top of the buildings in Detroit? in the lowest
absolutely.
socioeconomic area just to see what would happen.
Just to see what would happen. They sent people into the blast, after the blast, of course, but
Yes.
in the blasted area of where atomic weapons have been tested to see what would happen. So they sent GIs into that,
Yeah.
you know, and then of course we will know what happens now. I mean, back then I guess they should have had a good idea. But so the point is, biological warfare is as old as time. It has been used in countless instances. Now I want to take you through some of these. Oh, in fact, Dave is going to take you through some of these
I'll
initially.
start you off.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's important to understand that this is not a new mindset, and it is. I mean, why do we think we have these research labs? Why do you think Marburg, which is by the way in Germany, happened in Germany? The virus is an African virus. It escaped in Germany. It's usually named after the place where it happens. Marburg, Ebola, all these diseases, right? Why do you think they could spread as quickly as they did in the places? Because people worked on them, ostensibly to create vaccines and treatment protocols. Sure. Let's weaponize it first, and then we'll see what stops it. But tell us about antiquity.
When I stomp on your foot, Mickey, and I say gain of function, you say yes.
Yes.
So gain of function research has been going on forever, and anyway, so antiquity. The earliest documented incident of the intention to use biological weapons is recorded in Hittite text from 1500 to 1200 BC, in which victims of tularemia, is that good? Were what was it?
No, you're right. That's it.
Yeah, cool. Were driven into enemy lands, causing an epidemic. Although the Assyrians knew of ergo, a parasitic fungus of rye which produces ergotism, when ingested, there is no evidence that they poisoned enemies' wells with the fungus, as has been claimed. Here's another one. According to Homer's epic poems about the legendary Trojan War, the Iliad and the Odyssey, spears and arrows were tipped with poison. During the first sacred war in Greece in about 590 BC, Athens and the Amphictonic League poisoned the water supply of the besieged town of Kira near Delphi with the toxic plant of hellebore. Meki.
During the 4th century BC, before the Common Era, Scythian archers tipped their arrow tips with snake venom, human blood, and animal feces to cause wounds to become infected. Well, if that don't do it, nothing will.
I think the animal feces would be enough.
You would think so, right? In a naval battle against King Eumenes of Pergamon in 184 BC, Hannibal of Carthage, the guy who led the elephants across the Alps, had clay pots filled with venomous snakes and instructed his sailors to throw them onto the decks of enemy ships.
Nice.
That's pretty neat. I know, right? The Roman commander Manius Aquilius poisoned the wells of besieged enemy cities in about 130 BC. In about AD 198, the Parthian city of Hatra, which is near Mosul in Iraq, modern-day Iraq, repulsed the Roman army led by Septimius Severus by hurling clay pots filled with live scorpions at them. There must have been a lot of clay pots with scorpions.
I really like their style.
I know, right? Now, there are numerous other instances of the use of plant toxins, venoms, and other poisonous substances to create biological weapons in antiquity. What happened in the Middle Ages, my friend?
Yeah, I just before to protect Australia, I think we should fly over the enemy with funnel web spiders and brown snakes.
That'll do it.
Yeah, see, I've got their mentality. I'm right up there, Mackie, with that style of warfare.
You must have that DNA.
Who knows? Who knows? The Mongol Empire established commercial and political connections between the eastern and western areas of the world through the most mobile army ever seen. The armies, composed of the most rapidly moving travelers who had ever moved between the steppes, STEPPES, of East Asia, where the bubonic plague was and remains endemic among small rodents, managed to keep the chain of infection without a break until they reached and infected peoples and rodents who had never encountered it. The ensuing Black Death may have killed roughly one-third of the population of Europe in the next decades,
Yes.
changing the course of Asian and European history. Well, I'll keep going. During the Middle Ages, victims of the bubonic plague were used for biological attacks, often by flinging fomites such as infected corpses and excrement over castle walls using catapults. Awesome. In 1346, during the siege of Kaffa, now Feodosia in the Ukraine, the attacking Tatar forces, they're Tatars, Meki, were subjugated by the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan. They used the bodies of Mongol warriors of the Golden Horde who had died from plague as weapons. An outbreak of plague followed, and the defending forces retreated, followed by the conquest of the city by the Mongols. It has been speculated that this operation may have been responsible for the advent of the Black Death in Europe. At the time, the attackers thought that the stench was enough to kill them, though it was the disease that was deadly. Go on, your turn.
At the siege of Tonlevec in 1340, during the 100 Years' War, forget the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War, the attackers catapulted decomposing animals into the besieged area. In 1422, during the siege of Karlstein Castle in Bohemia, Hussite attackers used catapults to throw dead, but not plague-infected bodies, and 2,000 carriage loads of dung over the walls. That's a bucket load of dung. The last known incident of using plague corpses for biological warfare occurred in 1710, when Russian forces attacked the Swedes by flinging plague-infected corpses over the city walls of Reval, which is modern-day Tallinn. However, during the 1785 siege of Lacal, Tunisian forces flung diseased clothing into the city. English longbowmen usually did not draw their arrows from a quiver, rather they stuck the arrows into the ground in front of them. This allowed them to knock the arrows faster, and the dirt and soil was likely to stick to the arrowheads, thus making the wounds much more likely to become infected. So, to be clear here, right now, of course, back in the Middle Ages and antiquity, people weren't as sophisticated, or science wasn't as sophisticated as it is today. I mean, some areas certainly were, but when it came to bacteria and viruses, etc., they couldn't be isolated. So what they did, they threw entire bodies infected or excrement that they thought to be infected over the city walls or on the enemy soldiers. Today we do the same thing. We're just more sophisticated, where we extract the the deadly material, the bacteria and the viruses from the corpses. We refine it. It's the same principle, though, right? I mean, the delivery method are more sophisticated, as well as the payload. They've all become more sophisticated. But Dave, and this is probably a really horrible and fairly recent part of our history. Why don't you tell us about the 18th century in North America?
Yeah, right. But when I'm done, I want you to talk about the tularemia.
Sure.
And go into the detail. Okay, so North America, 18th century. The Native American population was devastated after contact with the Old World due to the introduction of several fatal infectious diseases, notably smallpox. These diseases can be traced to Eurasia, where people had long lived with them and developed some immunological ability to survive their presence. Without similarly long as ancestral exposure, indigenous Americans were, let's say, immunologically naive and therefore extremely vulnerable. There are 2 documented instances of biological warfare by the British against North Americans, Indians, during the Pontiac's Rebellion of 1763. That was the 3-Year War. In the first, during a parley at Fort Pitt in June 24, 1763, Captain Simeon 𝐫𝐞𝐯𝐶 gave representatives of the besieging Delawares 2 blankets and a handkerchief that had been exposed to smallpox, hoping to spread the disease to the natives in order to end the siege. William Trent, the militia commander, left records that clearly indicated that the purpose of giving the blankets was to convey the smallpox to the Indians. British Commander Lord Geoffrey Amherst and Swiss-British officer Colonel Henry Bouquet discussed the topic separately in the course of the same conflict. There exists correspondence referring to the idea of giving smallpox-infected blankets to enemy Indians. It cited 4 letters from June 29th, July 13th, 16th, and the 26th of July. Excerpts Amherst wrote in July 16th, 1763, P.S. You will do well to try to inoculate the Indians by means of blankets, as well as to try every other method that you can serve to extirpate this execrable race. I should be very glad your scheme for hunting them down by dogs could take effect. Bouquet replied on July 26th, I received yesterday your Excellency's letters of 16th and their enclosures, the signal for Indian messengers, and all your directions will be observed. Wow. I'll finish this off. Smallpox is highly infectious and does not require contaminated blankets to spread uncontrollably, and, together with measles, influenza, chickenpox, and so on, had been doing so since the arrival of Europeans and their animals. Trade and combat also provided ample opportunity for transmission of the disease. And if you're looking for more details, look for the smallpox during Pontiac's Rebellion. It is unclear if the blanket attempt succeeded. It is estimated that between 400 to 500,000 Native American Indians during and after the war died from smallpox.
Not insignificant. And in fact, if it hadn't been for the disease that wiped out so many of the Native Americans, right? The history might have taken a very different turn. It's funny how, it's really funny how history works. I mean, you look at Pizarro, Cortez, and just the sheer dumb luck they had, when they landed, with a handful of people subjugating, vast South American empires. Similarly, without the disease and gunpowder, I think the European colonization of North America would have gone a very different way. I do want to share quickly, though, and we have time, something that happened in New South Wales, which is interesting. Australian Aborigines, the Koories, have always maintained that the British deliberately spread smallpox in 1789, but this possibility has only been raised by historians from the 1980s, when Dr. Noel Butlin suggested there are some possibilities that disease could have been used deliberately as an exterminating agent. In 1997, David Day claimed there remains considerable circumstantial evidence to suggest that officers other than Philip, or perhaps convicts or soldiers, deliberately spread smallpox among Aborigines. And in 2000, Dr. John Lambert argued that strong circumstantial evidence suggests the smallpox epidemic, which ravaged Aborigines in 1789, may have resulted from deliberate infection. Judy Campbell argued in 2002 that it is highly improbable that the First Fleet was the source of the epidemic, as smallpox had not occurred in any members of the First Fleet. The only possible source of infection from the fleet being exposure to variolous matter imported for the purposes of inoculation against smallpox. Campbell argued that while there has been considerable speculation about a hypothetical exposure to the First Fleet's variolous matter, there was no evidence that Aboriginal people were ever actually exposed to it. She pointed to regular contact between fishing fleets from the Indonesian archipelago, where smallpox was endemic, and Aboriginal people in Australia's north as more likely as a more likely source for the introduction of smallpox. She notes that while these fishermen are generally referred to as Macassans, referring to the port of Makassar on the island of Sulawesi, from which most of the fishermen originated, some traveled from islands as distant as New Guinea. She noted there's little disagreement that the smallpox epidemic of the 1860s was contracted from Macassan fishermen and spread through the Aboriginal population via their traditional social, kinship, and trading networks. She argued that the 1789 to 90 epidemic followed the same pattern. Now, considering what we've just learned about the British policy, just a mere 20 years earlier, 1763, to the North American natives, right? And then it seems to, if I was a governor here in Australia, a British governor, and I say, oh, my buddies over in England, in North America, they've done well with this whole disease thing.
Yes.
I'm going to try it here. So I'm just looking at the connections, historical connections here. You know what I mean?
Oh, there's no... The pain was felt by those, Mickey, not us.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So, just to wind out that, I suppose, the 20th century, by the turn of the 20th century, advances in microbiology had made thinking about germ warfare part of the Zeitgeist. Jack London, in his story Ya 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 from 1909, described a punitive European expedition to a South Pacific island deliberately exposing the Polynesian population to measles, of which many of them died. While much of the material for London's South Sea Tales is derived from his personal experiences in the region, it is not known whether this particular incident is historical. London went on to write a science fiction tale, The Unparalleled Invasion. He wrote that in 1910, in which the Western nations wipe out all of China with biological attack.
Now, I'm happy to say I've got both books here behind me on the bookshelf because I love Jack London. He's a great writer, and he was part of the gold fields or gold rush in Alaska. He traveled the Pacific extensively, and a lot of the things that he did see, he wrote about. Am I putting it past these people? Not at all. No, because again, if it worked, right, in the past, then let's keep doing it. And you have to understand this. This is about the same time, 1909 and earlier, where we still kept people in zoos.
Oh yes.
So if we keep people in zoos, right, and again, you have to look at the collective zeitgeist, which means the collective outlook on the world. Okay, to understand how people treated each other and how they thought of each other. Well, first of all, not as people at all. That's one. But secondly, anything was permissible, because the 19th century, more even than the 18th or 17th century, was an era of expansion. Okay, an era of where the British Empire truly expanded to its most I don't know, to its greatest extent in many ways, right? Only to be brought to an abrupt halt in the aftermath of World War I and World War II. And because it was such an expansionist policy, any and all means were used to facilitate that expansion. Not just by the British, by the way. The Belgians in the Congo are horrific. Italians, the French, the Germans weren't much better. All the European powers that were hell-bent on expansion, they followed a policy of genocide, more or less, exploitation and genocide. Of course, this is now coming to bite us in the butt with the, what's it called? The history, anti-history, or what's the term now? Counter history revolution that's happening now. What's where we try to
the cancel culture.
Cancel culture. That's it. Thank you. Which is now, obviously. But my opinion is we shouldn't forget this at all. Yeah, we can tear down the monuments, but maybe we should build new ones to remember what happened. Right? We have to remember what happened. It's really important to understand. Yeah, Prima Nocta, Easy 45 says here, that was a way to breed the native population out, that the British employed or brought back. It was a Roman thing, but the British brought it back when they tried to deal with the Irish and the Scottish.
Mickey, it's really good to see the people in the chat room are across these events.
Oh, completely. And so it it is important to understand that the mindset we are espousing here of a pandemic is not new. It is not new. Disease has always been, and again, it's the cheapest. It's bang for buck. It's the cheapest you can get, and it's effective. And this is this pandemic here. Yes, it is deadly. Not very deadly, but it's the knock-on effects here that we have to worry about, especially, in my opinion, the fertility knock-on effects, but also obviously the devastating economic effects this is having. Entire countries, Dave, are cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah, they are.
And there's the music, I think.
It sure is the music. You've been listening to Dave and Mickey's Shiny Side Out. This is show 476. We're going to catch you next week for 477. In the meantime, watch the news, stay alert, and inform yourself. Like, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned for Jer Bear's great show coming up next after hours.